Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are going to be learning a particularly potent Torah. And like we said, the Rebbe's Torah is a pharmacy, and therefore each person, in accordance with their condition, they have to kind of come and take what they need. And so today, this is the Torah that I'm looking towards as the therapeutic salve for being in this world. But Baruch Hashem, yesh lanu tzaddik kazeh, yesh lanu rofeh kazeh. We have a doctor like this who preempted the sickness with the medicine that was going to give us the strength. Depending on how quickly we go through it, we can also look towards the next Torah as well, Chaf Gimel and Chaf Daled, 23 and 24, in Likkutei Maharan Tinyana. And let's go directly into the words. Rabbi Nachman gives us a hagdara of what this teaching is about. Be'inyan hasimcha. With regards to joy. Regarding the matter of joy. Al pi mashal. So without going into teaching, without going into theoretics of it, Rabbi Nachman goes directly towards the analogy, to the metaphor, which is to bring the idea down to the level in which the person is standing. Simcha is not an abstract concept. Simcha is not a teaching. Simcha is not a thesis. Simcha is not a paper that one writes. It's not a book that one writes. It's an inyan. It's an inyan that a person has to experience, and therefore the only way to properly understand it is by way of the mashal. The mashal is mashal hakadmoni. The Torah is the way that Hashem gives a mashal for us to even begin to thematize what it might mean to think about Hashem. And the Torah is a mashal hakadmoni, meaning to say that even when the Torah is understood, we have to grasp that it's just HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealing himself to us down here below by way of a metaphor. And that really every mashal reminds us that there's a nimshal that's hidden within it. And the mashal is also the nimshal. The mashal is also embedded within the metaphors and the analogies that draw the ideas down to our lived experience. That's also the Torah. So Rabbeinu, when talking about simcha, to highlight that it's not an abstract concept, and it's not even something that can be described. If you're describing it, you're not in a state of simcha, because simcha is meant to be something that's all saturating to the degree that I have no need to reflect on it. Self-reflection happens when a person is not in a state of simcha. In a state of simcha, one is filled with that experience, and therefore it could only be described by way of metaphor. There are times where there are numerous people who are dancing and joyously dancing, or dancing with joy, or are joyous and are dancing. And what happens is there's those who are dancing in the circle. Then there's the chevra who decide that they're not ready to enter into the circle, whether it's because of an inner brokenness or an external reasoning or a posturing, whatever the seriousness it is that's preventing a person from relinquishing themselves and allowing themselves to dance even though they don't want to, they stand on the outside. The person standing outside of the circle dance is a person who's covered over with sadness or despondency of the spirit, meaning either way, when you come to the core of what's keeping a person out of the circle, if they're still there by the circle, but they're out of the circle and they're keeping themselves out, then we can assume that there's something blocking the individual internally from being drawn into the circle. Now, Rabbi Nachman is not saying there's chevra outside of the building who don't want to come in, and you have to go out and drag them in. That's not what Rabbi Nachman is saying. He's saying the people who are already in the room of the dancing, but they're not joining the dance, because they've revealed already that they have a connection to the dance, but their relationship to the dance is by standing outside of it. A person like that needs to be drawn into the dance. But someone who has not yet declared that they want shaykhis or relatability to the dance, it's not necessarily our avoda to go out and convince people of the beauty of the dance on the inside. There are enough people who want the dance but don't have the capacity to enter into it, very often ourselves, that's where the avoda of simcha has to happen. The parts of ourselves, the other people who are standing outside as a result of sadness and despondency. Sadness, I would say, over here is more of a momentary feeling, something that causes me to be sad, an event, something takes place that causes a certain element of sadness, versus marashchayru, which is more of a condition, of a perpetual state of a certain tendency towards sadness that needs no reason to be activated, but rather it's perpetually there. But what we have to do, what simcha actually is when you force the atzlus and the marashchayru, the people outside, you force them into the circle of dancing against their will. against their will. Now, the against their will here is important because we're dealing with a person who entered in, sees the dancing taking place, and stands to the side. A person like that has already revealed their innermost desire to be part of the dancing. But you go outside of the store, of the place where the dancing is taking place, and you try and convince a person that you really want to be in the dance. We're the ones who sound foolish. And when that becomes the model of kind of bringing something that's far in, so then we miss the point. There's so many parts of ourselves and individuals who want in, but seem to be stuck in the periphery of that inness. And that's the place where the work of drawing the despondency into joy has to take place. That's where Bal Korcho is appropriate. Because Bal Korcho, against one's will, by way of compulsion, stands in stark opposition to anything true and holy. As the Bala Sulam says, Ein kefia beruchnias. There's no compulsion when it comes to spirituality. There's no compulsory engagement with spiritual avodah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu held the mountain over our heads, and if we didn't accept the entirety of the Torah, he said, Sham tiye kvar, that's where you're going to fall apart. So that's part of the baseline foundational relationship between God and the Jewish people, in which the Maharal has a very powerful teaching. It's just like a person who forces themselves upon somebody else, and as a result of that, there's a birth and that there's a marriage. So the person who forced himself upon the other person doesn't have the right to ask for a divorce. So too, the Maharal says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu forced us into our relationship with him, and as a result of Hashem forcing us into the relationship with him, Hashem doesn't have the right to say that he doesn't want to be part of the relationship anymore. But that's at the foundation of the relationship. But in spirituality, there's no compulsion. So how can Rabbi Nachman say force the sadness and the despondency and the opposite of joy into the circle of joy against its will? It must be that because it's proximate to the territory of joy, and it's those things that I'm thinking about that are keeping me away from joy, well, then they already have a relationship with the territory of joy. And if they already have a relationship with the territory of joy, even though the relationship that it has to joy is the opposite of it, nevertheless, the fact that it shares a border with joy means that it has already declared its innermost desire to want to enter into the circle, in the aspect of koifinasai ad sheyomer rotzani. And so it's the parts of ourselves that are susceptible to be brought into joy, even though they're not there yet, that our responsibility is to include those parts of ourselves into the avodah of simcha. And we compel them against their will that they should join in with the joy in addition to us. So the nature of joy, says Rabbi Nachman, is not simply to be joyous while leaving out the parts of ourselves, or let's focus on the self, the parts of ourselves or the others in the world that don't want to yet enter into that circle of joy. Real joy is something that breaks free from the borders that contain it. That the ufaratsta, breaking free from the boundaries of self and overcoming the boundaries, is the expression of joy. It's a spontaneous overwhelming of the bounded nature of self that can flush forward across its borders and extend itself farther. That's a tefach sochik. A laughing tefach is something that extends itself, revealing the more within what it previously considered to be the less. Natata simcha belibi, Hashem, you place joy in my heart, you expand my heart, you give me the ability to hold more within myself, to hold the entire world, only through the koach of simcha. Ki b'simcha teitzeu, because it's joy that takes a person out. Why? What's keeping a person in? It's the boundaries, it's the borders. And the way that I break free from the boundaries of the borders is by breaking open the walls, by breaking over the jail cell of the mind with simcha. We saw today in the Ramchal that our avodah is to transform the sohar and destroy the sohar, which is the same osios. Samech Hey Reish is sohar, and it can be transformed into haras. We have to destroy those things that are keeping us contained within our minds, keeping us stuck. And that's joy. Joy breaks through the boundaries. It includes even its opposite within itself, where we allow ourselves to be okay, even with that which feels not okay. Because joy, ultimately, for the Maharal, joy is shleimus, fullness. But we also know the fundamental principle that there's no such thing as wholeness. And so ultimately, the definition, as I understand it, of joy, or the possibility of joy, is living as if things are whole in spite of the fact that I'm aware of the fact that they continue to be deficient, which is the secret of Ezehu Ashir Hasameach Bechelko. True simcha comes about when it's simcha of a partial orientation. partiality. I don't have all of it. I'll never have all of it. As Rav Kook says, Hasameach bechelko implies simcha chelkis. It's always a partial happiness until Mashiach Tzidkenu arrives. And when I have that awareness that I can be okay with all of these things that still are theoretically against my ability to be okay, but I can include the things that make me feel not okay within the territory of being okay, that's the true source of simcha. Kein yesh be'inyan hasimcha. So too, we have this metaphor of the dancing, right? We have this metaphor of drawing somebody else in, something that's outside of the circle into the inside of the circle to transform the outside into the inside. Rabbi Nachman says so too. Once we've given you the metaphor, we can now abstract it back to what it means to take shape within an individual themselves. Adam sameach, when a person has a moment of joy, when a person has a moment of all rightness, when a person has a moment of okayness, what happens is the first level of joy is that despondency and darkness, which are the opposites of joy, they get pushed out to the sides. There's a tzimtzum that takes place. That which was the center gets pushed out to the periphery, and the center is taken over by something new and improved, which is the secret of joy. And immediately, joy is docha, all of the darkness. Ma'at min ha'or doicha harbe min ha'choshech. But it doesn't mean it's gotten rid of the choshech. It's just pushing it out of the way. It's pushing it outside of the center of the scene. That's one level of simcha, where I push aside the things that block me from okayness, that block me from all rightness, and I ignore them, and I let them stay on the periphery, because now I'm in the center, I'm in that place of simcha. Aval ma'ala yisera, but that's only the first level, where there's joy and it pushes sadness and despondency and the opposite of sadness to the outside perimeter. And I'm learning how to suppress it and ignore it, but I've done nothing to elevate it and transform it. But there's another level. Aval mala yisera, there's a higher level. Lehit ametz lirdof achar hamarashchera dafka. Lehit ametz, to garner the courage within the self, to put the effort in, the courageous effort, lehit ametz, to enter into the burdensome task of cultivating the courage, the amitz koach, which gives me the ability to do that thing which is more difficult. Lirdof achar hamarashchera dafka. It's not enough to push it out to the periphery and to suppress it and to ignore its existence or to try and repress it and pretend it's not there. Adraba ipcha mastabra. I have to chase after the marashchera. I have to chase after the marashchera dafka, specifically. That counterintuitive hermeneutical secret of Likkutei Maharan, of dafka. It's specifically in the counterintuitive place towards what you thought you would have found. You're going to come to find the thing you're looking for. When Rabbi Nachman says afal pikein, it says, I want to be besimcha. I still have a little bit of sadness, so I push the sadness to the side. But afal pikein, in spite of the fact that I have a stira, I can still be joyous. That's afal pikein. Nevertheless, I could still be joyous. But daika is that no. The marashchera that I'm pushing away to the side that continues to resist the inclusion within the light of unity, it's specifically there that I have to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's specifically there that I have to open up the territory with joy. Because when I include the opposite within something, like we've always said, it magnifies the light of simcha. Aval Maila Yisera, there's a better experience, there's a higher level of avodah, lehit ametz lirdof achar marashchera dafka. Not to ignore it, but to gaze at it, to look at it. Again, not to celebrate it, not to chew on it longer than we need to, not to romanticize it, but rather to chase after it and not to be afraid of it. Not to be afraid of it. Instead of it chasing us our entire lives and then hoping for the moments where we can convince it to go to the side because I'm happy enough or I've enabled myself to forget it for a second, but then at the same moment I'm terrified of those things that are going to take me away from joy. Adraba ipcha mastabra, to be mitgaber, mitametz, to chase joy, to allow joy to chase sadness. Not for sadness to be chasing joy and for every moment of joy to feel like it's on borrowed time about to disappear. But adarabah, to transform the entire relationship, not to be mitfached klal, and to come to realize that no, joy has the ability to chase sadness and to include sadness. What's more powerful? My son told me something incredible that I don't know if the number is correct, but in order to allow one's face to frown, so it takes something like the utilization of 11 facial muscles. But to smile, it takes something like 14 facial muscles. And the secret of the fact that joy is stronger than sadness. Joy is stronger than the tendency towards despondency. Joy has a strength that despondency does not have, but despondency seems like a terrifying barking dog, so we live our entire lives as if we are being chased by sadness, and joy feels feeble in its essence. But the truth of the matter is that by uncovering the amitz koyach, the chase after the marashchara daika, that's the secret of transforming my life and realizing that my real self is a joyous self. Natata simcha belibi. You've placed joy within my heart. And for Rabbi Nassan, joy was a very delicate thing. It meant in the end of the day, at least I'm a Jew. At least I'm not a Jew. I have something. It doesn't have to be based on anything other than the tiniest something imaginable. But once I uncover that potency of that inner point of joy, then the whole system is transformed and I begin to chase the Marash Chayra. La'achniso so gam came b'toicha simcha, to include it also within the simcha, that also, that gam ki elach begetz amaves lo yira rakiati yumadi, also, gam charvona zachar latov, v'gam. Gam is the secret of Nacham ish gamzu latova. Gam is the secret of including that which we thought was excluded into the inclusivity to reveal the doubled nature of that which is being included. Gam ki elach begetz amaves. It's not just about dispersing the sadness or compelling the sadness to stay on the side or reducing it to something that doesn't disturb me in the minute, which is the darga of eskafia, of subduing the sitra achra, subduing the sadness, but not transforming it in its root, which perpetually keeps me in that mindset of once the sadness wakes up, then I'm in trouble. But the doubled secret of ishafcha, where I transform the sadness itself, and I transform the difficulty itself into a place of joy, which is the joyful acceptance of that which is, and the capacity to find the irreducible point of enoughness that rests at the base of the soul at all times, natata simcha belibi. So then I'm mahapich l'marishchayra v'chol hayisurim l'simcha. Then every ounce of concealment and every ounce of darkness, which are real kalim that are very thick in their essence, not in their essence, in their appearance, those things get transformed to become the vehicles that are going to reveal a new potency of joy. A tov ma'od. A tov is a joy that dispels darkness. A tov ma'od is a joy that includes darkness within itself. And every ounce of Yisurin and Marishchayra are shown to be the place where I was capable of pushing the limit and breaking through to the other side of my sense of limitation in my mind, that I could also be okay and all right in this moment. And the secret of what the Ramchal describes as samchenu p'yimos anisanu, that there are days of affliction, profound days of affliction, b'machshava, b'dibor, b'maisa, moyach, lev, kaved, throughout Jewish history, in the individual experience of each and every person. And there's the yemos anisanu, the days of affliction, that middle point of our lives that appears to be devoid of the illuminated unity of God at the beginning and the illuminated unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu at the end. And the Geula Shlema is going to be where we come to uncover the joy that was inherent within those dead days as well. And Rabbi Nachman is saying, don't wait to the future to do this. Do it now. Do it now. Why? Ki ata imadi. Ata. Nochach. How could it be that I'm in Gate Salmaves and I'm with Noichachus of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? That's the paradoxical beauty of the Torah HaKadosh. It understands, like the Kamarna Rebbe says, that the Baal Shem Tov said, the Shver Ezach is that a person can receive Torah from the mouth of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in one moment, and in the next moment they have to be concerned that they're being tossed down into the abysmal depths of the depths, the Nukva de Tohaim Rabbah. Existence is a mixed bag of Marash Chayra and Simcha, of Shiflus and Simcha b'vasachas, of Bechia Takua Beliba B'Sitrada, V'chedva Takua Beliba B'Sitrada, that joy and sadness, joy and Tzbrachenkite are both engraved within the heart at the very same moment. B'derech haba l'seicha simcha. It's all in the way of that person who's being drawn into the circle dance. Sha'az migoydel ha'simcha v'achedva mahapich kol ha'da'agos v'ha'atzvus marash chayra shaloi l'simcha. Just like the person who, after a while, they're resistant to the dancing, but they'll come to realize that in their resistance to the dancing, they've already made a few circles, and they've already been carried around the circuit of the circular dance already. And even though the mind is still resistant against the capacity of having that despondency and sabrachenkeit and seriousness, which causes me to be skeptical and frustrated and all of the different things that give birth to sadness and hopelessness, after a while, even though we let it complain, but by ignoring its complaint, the complaint stops being so loud. And it begins just part and parcel of the unity of the simcha experience. Before including the opposite of simcha into simcha, I thought simcha was only strong enough to operate when all that existed was simcha. But by including the opposite of simcha into the secret dance of simcha and ultimately allowing it to coexist to the degree that not only does it no longer disturb the original place of simcha, but rather increases it by way of the shift that enables the radical change to overcome despondency within the simcha itself, to find more simcha within my simcha, in the secret of Ba'or Chanira, or that within your light I see more light. How could it be? I'm in the light already. How could I see more light? Elama, there's concealment within the light as well, which enables me to transform it to the next darga. And in that place, slowly but surely, the simcha is transformed. And it's nisapich from worry and sadness. Here, Rabbi Nachman is adding the word worry for the first time. Sadness and worry, anxiety, depression are obviously, on the phenomenological sense of the felt experience of their externalized symptoms. I'm not talking about diagnostics, but in their exterior, worry over the future and sadness over the past are ultimately rooted in the same disorientation and separation from the present moment itself. Nimtza, it turns out, we steal from the side of the Marashchera, we steal from the concealment, and we bring it into the simcha bal karcho. Now, this is obviously, Rabbeinu is describing the crux of Tanya, but also it's ultimately rooted, it seems, in the Maimer of Chazal that at the end of the week, on Friday night, when a person is ready to walk back into their home, and the world is meant to be a transformed thing, and it's Shabbos now, and it's a different existence, that a person has traveled with two malachim. On the right side of the person is the malach tov, and on the left side of the person is the malach ra, the good angel and the negative angel. And the Arizal says, and the Heligat Tzadikim point out, that what those malachim are the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov. The Yetzer Hara is entrenched within the left ventricle of the heart, and the Yetzer Tov is entrenched within the right ventricle of the heart. And ultimately, the question is going to be, is Shabbos in the house or not? If the angels see that it's not Shabbos and the entire day is treated like the rest of the week, so then the negative ministering angel, the Yetzer Hara, looks and curses the Jewish people and laughs about how much they're missing the point. But, says the Gemara, if the malachim come to see that the home is filled with Shabbos and the entire world, in spite of the fact that it looks the same, has shifted completely, so in that place, the Malach Tov gives a bracha, the Yetzer Tov gives a bracha, the Malach Ra Yomer Amen Bal Korcho. And the Malach Ra, the negative angel, the Yetzer Hara, has to say Amen to the bracha of the positive angel against its will. Why? Because it's exactly what we're saying. It's one thing to have the Malach Tov say yes to the world. It's one thing to feel good about Shabbos. It's another thing to have the opposite of Shabbos agree to the beauty of Shabbos. It's another thing entirely when there's an illumination that comes about from the very thing that was taking away my ability to be in the place that I wanted to be. Because now I've extended the destination. My destination can be found even in its opposite. Simcha is so powerful that it has the capacity to transform even its opposite into a place of the radical affirmation of more Simcha, where the Malach Ra, where the Yetzer Hara itself is acknowledging that, yes, in truth, every ounce of my effort, every ounce of my struggle to conceal and to create darkness and to cause despondency and to engage in the mechanics of hopelessness and to paint a picture of a reality or an existence personally or collectively that seems without hope or without help or without rectification, or it seems to be devoid of the possibility of being seen through the lens of redemption, all of that, says the Yetzer Hara, every ounce of it has only been in order to reveal the radical certainty of the joy that comes about by the kiyum of Ratzon Hashem, by radically affirming ki b'simcha teitzeu. And for Rabbi Nachman, simcha was a theological stance. Simcha was not an emotional experience. If it's an emotional experience, you can't be commanded on it. It's a theological stance. Everything has to be seen through a lens of simcha. Simcha doesn't mean a feeling of simcha. It means a framework of simcha. To mach freilich sein means do whatever it takes to create a frequency of your mind of a loving acceptance of that which is, with the capacity to gaze at it and find the enoughness of a lokus that rests hidden in that place, and then to grow from that perspective. And so the Malach Ra says, you're right, Amen, it's true. It's fundamentally true. Every ounce of concealment, every ounce of darkness, every ounce of the parts of myself that want to be outside the circle of joy and the resistance to joy, all of that is only so that joy can extend its territory. Malach Ra Yomer Amen is Rosh Tevos Meir. And the secret of Rabbi Meir, who's the secret of the Arich Bedora, Rabbi Meir had the ability to learn from Acher. Rabbi Meir had the ability to find the rimon and to eat the inside of the rimon and to toss away its outer shell. But you know what? Rabbi Meir also would have had the ability to transform the outer shell into Kedusha as well. But the Gemara wasn't ready to teach us that Nakuda yet. Because we have to first get to the same Nakuda of Rabbi Meir being able to eat from the fruit and toss away the klipa. But in truth, the full totality of the worlds of separation in their core, which are worlds of sadness, are in truth just hiding and covering over the innermost point of Yichud, which is the light of Simcha. And like Rabbi Meir, who has the ability to be Mahapech L'choshech into Or, and to say 49 reasons why something is kosher and 49 reasons why something is puzzle. Not just to say the yes of the Torah, but to include the no of the Torah within the secret of the unity of the Torah. That's the secret of Malach Ra Yomer Amen Bar Kocho. That's the secret of Mashiach. Ruach Apenu Mashiach Hashem is Rosh Tevos Meir. Rabbi Meir is Rav Nehuroi. It's the light that emerges from this worldliness itself. The capacity to transform the darkness into light itself, and to reveal how the darkness itself is a kli and a vessel that has the capacity of allowing the light to be illuminated even more so. And this is the element of the pasuk in Yeshaya that says, you will come to grasp sasan and simcha, these two forms of joy, which the Heilige Gras said he came down into the world to explain the difference between these two forms of joy, which are hinted to the Trei Minim, the two heretics who have a conversation by the Simchas Beis HaShoeva about what's more significant, Sason or Simcha, 5 or 6. Simcha is the lashon of Chamisha, and Shisha, Sason is the language of 6. It corresponds to Netzach and Hod, and ultimately the unification within Yesod and Yishmael and Esav, as the Gra describes. But ultimately, this Sason and Simcha, these two forms of inner and outer joy, Yasigu, when we grasp them, Nasu Yagan Va'anacha. Despondency and the sighs that come about as the result of deficiency, they go away. What does it mean they go away? Shahayagon Va'anacha Borchim V'nasim V'nasimcha. That when joy comes down, sadness runs away. It can't tolerate joy. Because if joy were to shine its light on sadness, the sadness would dissipate. So what does sadness do? It runs out of sight and it says, let's continue to exist in the shadows and let joy do its thing. And the moment joy dissipates again, we'll have the ability to come back and invade the scene, because joy can't be maintained for too long. And Mamela will have the ability to run back and fill the scene. So let's just stand on the side. That's the first shlav, where I'm happy, but there's sadness that's waiting to pounce the moment that the reason for happiness is left. But there's a wisdom and an awakening of the joy within the joy, which says, wait a second, I'm joyous now, but I know that this Yagon Va'anacha are waiting for me in the next moment. So instead of losing sight of the fact that there's a further purpose to my joy and getting stuck in just the momentary joy of the moment, I have to run after the despondency and say, I understand why you want to remain excluded, but I'm revealing your purpose. I'm revealing that only reason you're here is so that I can increase my joy. And we chase after the joy. We extend the territory of the joy. Because in the moments of joy, the tendency of sadness and the despondency-induced sighs of experience tends to run to the side. But in truth, the truth of the matter is we have to turn around, realize the strength of joy, and instead of being chased, turn back and chase after it. And to grasp it. And to bring them back with us and to re-include them within the simcha specifically, because that's the place where true simcha is going to come from. And this is the explanation of sasa and v'simcha yasigu, that you'll come to grasp sasan and simcha. It doesn't mean I'll have simcha and sasan and then yagon v'anacha are going to run away, but the language of yasigu means grab it. That the true expression of the doubled nature of joy, which is wise enough to delay its immediate gratification of just experiencing itself devoid of its knowledge that it won't last forever, and to turn our sights on the things that wait to pounce on us afterwards and allow the joy to express itself outwards, maybe not with the same type of intensity of a localized point and nexus of joy, but certainly an extension of the territory of joy. And we understand that we have to go and we have to chase it and we have to drag it back in and re-include it within the secret of the Yichud, which is the secret of drawing all separation back into unity. Lachnisosam bal korcham l'soicha simcha. To re-include them against their will. Malachra yomer amen bal korcho within the simcha. Ki yesh yagon va'anacha. There's yagon va'anacha. Yagon va'anacha, the despondency, the language of despondency, the hopelessness, the weakness of self when it feels that reality is too much for it, or that no matter what effort is going to be put in, nevertheless, I won't get to the place that my mind expects me to get to or feels that it wants to get to. That yagon va'anacha, they're the sitra achra, it's the other side. It's what takes me away from the innermost side. She'enam roitzim lios merkava la kedusha. They don't want to be a merkava to kedusha. The sitra achra is the resistance in this world to reveal that this world is ultimately the resting place for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu understood there have to be elements that stand in stark opposition to the Ratzon of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which is sadness and despondency. And our job is to transform even the opposite of the place where Hashem can rest into a place where Hashem could rest. Again, in no place has Rabbi Nachman used the language of being mevatel, or completely undoing the yagon va'anacha. It's about including it within so as to magnify the yichud, where it's adding over and over more and more joy. That's the secret of the dance, that I'm returning back to the point of departure each and every time with newfound ferocity. Yagon va'anacha shema sitra achra, she'enam roitzim lios merkava ela kedusha kavyachol. V'al kein hem borchen min hasimcha, and therefore they run away from the simcha. We have to compel them and force them into joy, which means gladness, into holiness, bal korcham, against their will. This teaching is obviously a profound and fundamental, short, clear description of the purpose of the creation of the world. Purpose of the creation of the world is that so HaKadosh Baruch Hu can appear as a split thing, kaviyachol, where there's good and bad, where there's darkness and light, where there's sadness and joy. And ultimately, our goal is to emerge from within the very point of difference itself, the very point of separation itself, where we feel the split most intensely. And it's specifically there where we feel the split between the unity so intensely that we have the radical ability of revealing the connection between the two. And when we sew together that which appears most separate at its lowest point of separation, what we do is we create the deepest yichud imaginable. There's no yichud when up here, simcha and atzvus are kind of operating in close proximity to one another because they're so close to one another. But as things degrade down into the seder shtalshlus and separate from one another and ultimately extend in their positions, and it appears that it's on the one side of the world and the other side of the world, when I sew and unify the two of those things back together and I drag the difference into the light of unity, I am creating a Kiddush Hashem of the likes that has never existed before. Kiddush Hashem is a descent into the place where there's the apparent Chilul Hashem, which is the vacancy of Hashem's light, and the reorientation of the self to include God's light within that place. That's the Tachlis Abriya, the Dir B'Tachtonim. Asiya Shaba Asiya, that's yored down into the Eser Klipos of Klipas Noga, which is Ragleha Yardumaves, the place where the legs dangle into death, that death-bringing nature of not wanting to dance. And the entire avodah is to learn how to dance with the resistance, to transform the malach ra into something that increases the light of the malach tov, to allow it to be the supplementality to perfection, to bring imperfection into the secret of perfection so that the imperfection and the sadness that comes along with it increases the joy that comes along with the increased light of perfection. And in that place, we can begin to understand the secret of why Rabbi Nachman is always telling us that not only it's a good thing to be happy, but we're compelled to be happy. Rabbi Nachman is doing exactly what he's describing in this teaching throughout the entire book of Likkutei Maharan. Not saying get rid of the sadness. Compel the sadness to become the place where you serve HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because it's artificial to pretend that you can get rid of all of the Marash Chayra and all of the Yagon and the Anacha. That's a momentary victory which is going to lead to a secondary loss that's going to be even worse than the first one. Because once the sadness sees that joy is gone, so then it pounces again. And then I feel tzabrachankeit because even my joy can't save me. But if I have the wherewithal to remember, joy is about extending outwards. It's about breaking down boundaries. It's about besimcha teitzeu. The only way I'm going to break free from the natural cycle and the ebb and flow of going back down into the dips that get as low as they were the previous time, even though we're armed with more knowledge about them. The reason is because we're not having that moment of pause to chase after the Marash Chayra. When we chase after the Marash Chayra with the confidence of that moment of joy, so then we include the opposite of unity into unity itself. This is the Tachlis Abriya. There's nothing outside of unity. Memela, something that feels more outside of unity, especially when it comes with that hargasha of tzibrachenkite, it's our avoda in a healthy way to mind our attention and our attitudinal space towards those areas that we're so frightened about, towards those places that we feel are the things that can take me out of joy, those things that my joy is dependent on. By including all of those notions of the things that I think my joy is dependent on into this independent moment of joy itself, I reveal the secret of an ahava she'ena tluya b'davar, of a simcha she'ena tluya b'davar, of a simcha pnimi that's boyer ad ein sof, that's not drawing its strength from anything in particular, but rather it is the framing of how I look at existence. And the secret of besimcha is the osios of machshava, that it's an orientation of thinking. It's an orientation of returning back to the center, allowing the mind to meander. But instead of that meandering to take me away from the center, believe enough in the centering of my mind to then allow the centering of my mind to meander. And when the center of my mind meanders, what it does is it extends the perimeter of the center. Typically, we think that if I leave the center point of my mind, I'm going to meander and I'm going to lose sight of the center point. Center point being simcha, the meandering leading me to the territories of sadness. What Rabbi Nachman is explaining is, no, have confidence in the innermost point of joy, in that nekuda of simcha, and then meander outwards towards the peripheries where joy does not want to be accepted, and force joy into that place as well, to be okay with ourselves, to include those things which we feel can't be included within ourselves, to allow the opposition to notice that we're not fighting it. It's part of the same unity that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is revealing. And when we can do that in our lives, then HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it outside as well. And when we're mamtik the dinim b'sharasham, and we can bring all of existence where the atzvus is choyle, where the atzvus is chal, in that place of hester, and we can bring it back up to that place of machshava, b'machshava ispariru, ki b'simcha teitzeyu, and we're mamtik the dinim b'sharasham, because we realize that sadness is also just a state of mind when it comes from the depth and the koyach of amuna that my mind has, and I can elevate everything back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's going to be the true form of joy when Mashiach Tzidkenu comes to reveal Samchenu Kimois Anisanu, how each and every pocket of energy that felt devoid of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by way of attaching ourselves with Simcha and Amunah to that place, each and every pocket of concealment is going to be transformed into an incubator and a reservoir where reality allowed the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to be greater than it could have ever been without the concealment itself. Be'ezras Hashem.